ABC Radio Australia.
In Fiji, Grace Road is not only a well-known church, it's also a thriving business empire. Its farms, supermarkets, restaurants, and many spin-off businesses can be found dotted across the country. The Korean church gained international notoriety in 2018 when its founder was arrested and convicted in Korea for abusing church followers in Fiji. Now, an investigation by the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project has looked at the Korean church's close relations with the Fiji government, including state-backed loans. Audrey Belford is the OCCRP's Australia and Pacific Regional Editor, and he joins us on the line from Sydney.
Hi, Evan. How are you doing?
Good morning, Aubrey. Now, why did your organization decide to investigate Grace Roads?
Well, so we got started in the Pacific just late last year, and, I started going around and talking to people in the region and talking to journalists in the region about what stories are out there. And, Grace Road is one of those stories that everyone talks about. But, there were a lot of open questions. Everyone can see that this is an absolutely thriving business in Fiji. I mean, any of your Fijian listeners or anyone who's been to Fiji in the last couple of years can see that their businesses are absolutely everywhere. And obviously, there's been a lot of murmuring about relationships between this sect and the government. So, naturally, we just had to look into it.
And how was that process of looking into this company, a church? Was information freely available, or how did that work out?
I mean, Fiji is actually a pretty hard place to do investigative work. It's not the most open country. So, the way we looked into this was by looking at publicly available information. The documents that are there for properties and businesses owned by the sect. And then we basically worked backwards. And we also worked with some very good Korean journalists at an investigative agency there called News Tapa. So, they were really good because they were able to go and speak to former sect members who had left that are in Korea and go through Korean court documents. So it was about 6 months of work to actually get this done.
Aubrey, what are the key findings from this investigation?
So our key findings, really, we looked at the whole pattern since Grace Road started out in Fiji nearly a decade ago. And it's received a very warm welcome from the Fijian government. And this has been very public. The PM, Frank Bainimarama, has publicly praised them. What we found is that they've grown into, one of the most significant business empires in Fiji right now. They run the largest chain of restaurants. They have half a dozen supermarkets, 2 mini markets, 5 mobile service stations, 400 hectares of farmland. And they've also received over 8.5 million Fiji dollars in loans from the Fiji Development Bank, which is a state-backed institution that reports to the Attorney General, Ayaz Sayed Qayyum.
How unusual is that to get backing from the Fiji Development Bank for a new business entity entering the country?
That's not something I can really speak to 100%. I think this is really, a question for Fijians. When I was asking people, there was a lot of surprise when, I would go to people with this fact. This was not something that was known, not something that's publicly reported. The other finding from the investigation, sorry, it's very early in the morning, so I'm not very used to being up this early. The other major finding is obviously we're looking into the investigations into Grace Road, because as you mentioned in your introduction, the leader of Grace Road, Reverend Okju Shin, was arrested in Korea and sentenced to 7 years in prison for abuses, including, the beatings of sect members, depriving of their passports, making them work without pay. But we also had half a dozen other Grace Road members were arrested in Fiji in 2018. And that included her son, Daniel Kim, who runs Grace Road in the country right now. The Koreans sent over a team of 17 police officers who worked with the Fijian police, raided Grace Road establishments. This was in August 2018, and these 6 people were arrested. And then suddenly they were let go. There were some court decisions, temporary injunctions against their deportation. And then basically the decision was made in Fiji that these people would not be sent back to Korea, but instead Fiji would do their own investigation in collaboration with the Koreans. Now, nothing has really happened since then. No one's been arrested. And, the official Fijian line is that they're still investigating and there just isn't enough evidence of abuses. What we were able to find by, doing our reporting work in Korea was that Fijian police officers, in fact, traveled to Korea and spoke to witnesses who gave them information about, being subjected to abuses on Fijian soil by people who are still in Fiji. These same abuses, against these same witnesses, have already been found to have happened by a Korean court. There has been, the conviction of Reverend Shin in Korea, where it mentions all these specifics, but yet Fiji has not seen fit to level any charges. So, another part of our investigation was just putting out into light exactly what has happened there. And again, this is now a question that needs to be answered, in Fiji, exactly what's going on here.
You're listening to Pacific Beat. I'm Evan Wasuka, and on the show with me is Aubrey Belford. He's the Australian Pacific editor for the Organised Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. Now, Aubrey, did your investigation find any illegal activity or any wrongdoing on behalf of Grace Road or its or the Fiji government?
So when it comes to Grace Road's been quite well documented to use this practice that they call the threshing floor, which is, when someone does something wrong, they're beaten publicly and they confess their sins. And, supposedly it's to beat evil spirits out of them. And if anyone wants to go to our webpage and read the story, we also have videos with people's, victims' faces blurred out, but you can see people being beaten there. So according to Korean courts and former church members that we spoke to, this is a regular occurrence. People are beaten within the sect. They have their passports taken, and they also work for no pay. So Grace Road got its start. We were able to calculate they brought at least 20 million Fiji dollars into the country as investment. And this is money put in by the 400 odd church members when they join. That money sort of gets managed collectively. It's used to invest in Fiji, and then these people will work without pay, essentially. A lot of them, the Fijian authorities said they interviewed these people and they said they're all happy to be there. And, I'm sure a lot of them are. But, the key fact is that, they are working out without pay. There have been these documented abuses, and so they have a real advantage in business because of that. We weren't able to find, there's no indication of corruption on the part of the Fijian government, but we did find that, a very obvious pattern of giving Grace Road very, very friendly treatment. Despite, these sort of things being documented, including this support from the Fiji Development Bank.
Aubrey, speaking of the Fiji government, were they able to talk to you in regards to your investigation?
We reached out for comment to the Prime Minister, the Attorney General, Investment Fiji, the Fiji Development Bank, the police, immigration. No one spoke to us. We also reached out to Grace Road for comment, and they didn't speak to us. And we also reached out to ExxonMobil because Grace Road operates mobile petrol stations in Fiji, and they didn't speak to us. So unfortunately, we didn't get much of the government perspective. The one person who did speak to us, to his credit, was the Director of Public Prosecutions, Christopher Pride. So we did talk about those cases that I mentioned. But in general, no, we got silence from the Fiji government.
So the report is out today. What are you hoping will happen next with this story?
We would just like to find out more. We don't really have a political interest in this. This is just a very interesting story. It's a fascinating story that, this sect with documented abuses has become so powerful in Fiji, has such an economic footprint and is really seen as having the favor of the government. So what we'd want to see is just, more information about this come to light. So I really hope that, we're going to be able to keep reporting on this.